Guys and girls, I'm back at Into Moto, and today we are looking, or revisiting let's say, Keeway Superlight 125, and there is a reason for it. And the reason is, this bike is 4 years old. And I'm constantly being told that Keeways will fall to pieces and there'll be a pile of rust after 12 months. 4-year-old bike. Let's have a look round. Let's see how rusty it is. Or in this case, how rusty it's not. This bike, as I've said, 4 years old. I am struggling to see the difference between this bike and one of the brand new ones that's in the showroom. That looks like a brand new exhaust. Very, very, very well looked after. I mean, look at the engine. I can't see any signs of corrosion, even on these chrome bits. Same go for the forks. Let's just have a full walk round so you can see exactly why I'm so impressed with this bike. So I've done a review on this bike before, so let me just do a recap for you. You have got a single disc brake at the back. Like with a lot of cruisers, you've got a single disc brake at the front as well, and that just seems normal for cruisers. I know Harley Davidson do it a lot on their new models as well, so it's no different to them. And I do consider this bike to be very much in the style of Harley Davidson. They've certainly got that old school cruiser look about them. It's a proper mudguard. That's going to keep all of the dirty bits from you, isn't it? That's a proper old school look. I like that. It's a big fuel tank. It appears very big the way it comes out. Typical cruiser. I think it only has a 15-litre fuel tank, but it's a 125, so you'll get loads of miles in that. Nice fuel gauge on there. Buttons. Let's have a look at those. So yeah, the switch gear on this looks like a brand new bike. It feels like a brand new bike with how everything, when you press it, just doesn't feel any different. Yeah, and you can see there is just the industry standard as far as the buttons go. They are very Harley Davidson. If you've seen my original review, you would know that unlike most modern day bikes, where on your left thumb you've got your left and right indicator, so that way, this is just like your standard Harleys. So you've got your left indicator over here and your right indicator over there, so you can see definitely where the inspirations come from. And then you've got the old school dials, which again, I just think it suits this type of bike. I think it's much better having those dials on a bike of this style. A TFT screen, a digital screen, would just ruin the whole look of it. And what I really like about these bikes is they're perfect for the shorter rider. This has got a 780mm seat height, which means for someone like myself, I've got a bent leg, I've got tiny legs, 29-inch inseam, but I've got a really big bend in my leg, which means somebody considerably smaller than myself will still be able to flat foot this bike. It's amazing. And the bike itself, even though it's a 125cc, put it next to any bigger engine bike, it doesn't look out of place because it has got quite a large presence, I think. It really is a comfortable position as well. Feet forward. I love my feet forward position. Yeah, it's a very comfortable place to be. I like the style. I do. I'm sold on these types of bikes. I'm sold on Keeway. This is probably the first Keeway that brought the brand to my attention, because I saw these bikes and thought, wow, you can get a brand new motorbike that looks like a mini Harley Davidson for £2,500. Because that's what they are, brand new. About £2,500 for one of these in the basic form. That's what they are on the road. Now they do have a different model that's a couple of £100 more expensive. That has a screen. I think they've got some rear bags as well. So you pay a few £100 but get quite a few extras thrown on. But at the price point of this bike, which is currently £1,999, you're getting an absolute pristine bike. It's impressive. Now the purpose of today, and the purpose of me revisiting this bike in particular, is I want to show people that Keeways will not rust and disappear into dust after a year of ownership. They're like any other motorcycle. If you look after them, they'll last. So this model here is 4 years old. It's got, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 miles on the clock, so it has been used. It's been looked after. It's had regular servicing, so it's got the full service history. It's been looked after. You can see there's no corrosion, and it's the point I want to get across to people who say, no, Chinese bikes rust buckets. It's just not the case anymore. I cannot stress this enough. If you buy any motorcycle and don't look after it, it will break, it will rust. If you buy any motorcycle, whether it be something like this that is cheap and cheerful, let's face it, brand new for £2,500 is a cheap motorcycle. But if you buy it, look after it like the previous owner has done in this case, you will have a bike that looks like a brand new motorcycle 4 years down the line. Shining example. So what I'm going to do today, I want to take this bike for a ride. I want to see if it still rides like a new bike, because it certainly looks like one. We'll see how it rides and how it fares, and I will confirm only after that ride if this is a used bike bargain. It's a saving of £500 thereabouts from a new bike on the road. So £500 and a bike already at this low price point is it's a nice chunk of change, isn't it? £500 is a little mini tour away. So yeah, I consider that a win. Very impressive, very impressed. Somebody has actually looked after the Keeway Superlight. Why doesn't everybody look after the Keeway Superlights? Why doesn't everyone look after the bikes? It still gets me. If you invest £500 or you invest £20,000 in a motorcycle, if you're using it for transport, for fun, for whatever, look after it, it will last. Don't look after it, it won't. Let's go for a ride. As expected, the rain's here, I'm getting wet. It's just standard, isn't it? Standard. I have about 2 dry days and then the weather turns on me. But it could be worse. Actually, no, it couldn't be worse. It's always picking raining, isn't it? It's what's worse. Anyway, before I do jump on this bike, what I want to say is I've just been inside and just re-looked at the bikes that are in there, the Keeway Superlights that are in. So they've got 4 in total, but they're ranging from like a year old to 4 years old. This is the oldest one and the one with the most miles, and that's why I wanted to take this one out, because this is ideally just to showcase for you lot just what a bike can actually look like if you look after it. And this is, you know, I'll use me commas, this is a cheap Chinese bike. However, 4 years old, still looks brand new. Do you know what I mean? Where's the arguments of they fall to pieces, they rust? There isn't one. It's just a standard. Look after a bike and it will remain in pristine condition and will keep working. Look after it, it will last. Don't look after it, it won't. Because I've seen Keeway Superlights that have been a year or two old and they've got signs of corrosion on them. And that is not because it's a Keeway Chinese bike, it's because whoever's bought it hasn't looked after it. They've either left it outside in the elements constantly, and they leave them constantly to just be rained on and abused, and then they're not cleaning them when they get dirty, and they're not servicing when they're supposed to, and then they complain that the bike's showing a bit of rust, which is silly. I don't think you can complain about a bike having rust on it if you're not looking after it, and you're not wiping it down when it gets wet, and you're not cleaning it when it gets dirty, and you're not doing what people are supposed to do with bikes. Like, I've got several bikes, and when it comes to the winter time, I get me spray out, you know, the anti-corrosion stuff, and I give them a wipe down. And I've got Yamahas, I've got Chinese bikes as well, and I give them the treatment that I give them because I want them to last, and I look after them. And because of that, my bikes look mint. They look like nice bikes, and they'll keep going for a long time. And this is the point of today. Look after them, guys. You're spending your hard-earned money on these, and you're using them for fun or to get to work. And if you want them to continue going, then continue to give them a little bit of love every now and then. Anyway, enough ranting. I'm going to take this bike for a ride, and I want to see how it's held up. Performance, gears, brakes, all that stuff. 4,500, but it is kilometers, so yeah, you gotta do the maths on that one. But anyway, this bike is absolutely pristine to look at. Is it any good for riding? Let's find out. What a lovely smooth start. Cobble test, really smooth, like a brand new engine would. Now, should you expect any less? I don't think you should anymore, because for me, these bikes now are a lot better than what the Chinese used to bring to the UK. Going back a couple of years, they were bringing over some proper cheap stuff, and because the cheap and nasty stuff that we were getting that was falling to pieces very, very quickly, I think what happened is it just creates an awful reputation of what Chinese bikes are like. And because of that, every single Chinese bike to follow all have the bad reputation, because if one Chinese bike's bad, they're all bad, aren't they? That's how kind of the world works nowadays, and that's the problem I have at the minute. And I keep stressing to people that the quality of these bikes is there now. It's not like it used to be. They are using better materials than what they used to. However, that still doesn't mean that they won't rust and have problems if you don't look after them. I feel stupid for saying it, because it should be obvious, I think. This is going through the gears just like a brand new bike would. It's comfortable, its gears going through nicely, no issues starting the bike from a cold start, and that's just from wheeling it straight out the showroom. No issues with any scuffs, marks, corrosion, absolutely nothing. The bike itself essentially looks and rides like a brand new motorbike. The only thing I think I would say is a negative for this bike, and it's usually a positive for me, but I really like the look of the bar end mirrors. I do. I think it is appropriate for the style of the bike, but my issue is the mirrors are so small, you don't see a great deal behind you, so it is a bit of a nightmare as far as the mirrors go. Like now, I can see pretty much the windshield of the car behind. nothing else. So practically speaking, they're not the greatest mirrors in the world. You could probably buy some bigger ones if you were going down the I want to see what's behind me route, which you should be. Desperately trying to get Taffy 2 Wheels and his Harley Davidson on the channel properly, because his Harley Davidson that he paid 20,000+ for started rusting after 6 months, and that's 6 months from owning it new. Now 6 months with a brand new £20,000 bike, and bear in mind with him in particular, he is very let's best way to describe it, his bike is cared for like you would care for a newborn baby, let's say that. It's in a nice warm heated garage, a very pristine garage at that. There's not a mark on the floor. He looks after everything, and his bike is always cleaned and polished. It always looks absolutely mint. Now his bike, after 6 months of being wrapped in cotton wool and riding probably a couple of thousand miles in that time, but not much, was showing corrosion on the brake discs. 10 months I think he's owned it now. He's now getting rust on his engine bars, the crash protection that's on it. He's now getting rust on that, and I keep telling him I need to get his bike next to a cheap Chinese bike so we can compare. I think it's a good comparison to make, because a cheap Chinese motorcycle that, like this, a 4-year-old one with no rust, no corrosion, no issues, lovely to ride, and he's got a 10-month-old one that is rusting, that has, well, he's always seems to be having issues with that bike. I don't know whether it's like a mobilizer stick on, or he's got to stand up and walk away from it sometimes to get it to start, and he's always having odd little niggly things wrong with it. It just goes to show it doesn't matter how much you pay, sometimes you can always have an issue. When I look at this bike now, this bike being 4 years old, doing 2,500 miles, is looking very much like a very brand new bike. If this had a brand new price tag on into Moto, I wouldn't have expected it wasn't a brand new bike. That is how good and how nice this bike looks, and that for me is a testament to its last owner looking after it, keeping it nice and pristine. It's all down to them, because everything on this bike works like you'd expect a brand new bike to. And I know there will be people that will say, I've got a 20-year-old or 30-year-old Honda that keeps on going and blah-de-blah. And yes, there will be many people like that, because those bikes have been looked after, because you have looked after them, and the reason they keep going and look pristine or whatever is because you keep them in a nice condition and you look after them, and they keep going and going and going and going and going. And I am trying to sell that point to everybody. If you were to look after something like this, for instance, there's no reason why this bike wouldn't be still going in 20 years. And I really do believe that, because I've seen these bikes, and I've seen these bikes coming into Moto being part exchanged, that have got a hell of a lot of corrosion on them. And I've seen them and thought, oh god, that's had a rough life, and they might be 3 years old. And a 3-year-old one of these shouldn't have lots of corrosion on. And I think a lot of people that would compare a Japanese bike to a Superlight have in their head one of these really rusted, not looked after examples. And when you've got something like that, you can say, oh, look at that, my Yamaha whatever, hasn't got a patch of rust on it and it's 10 years old, well, yeah, that'll be because you've looked after it more than somebody who just leaves the bike uncovered in the elements, basically doesn't look after it, doesn't service it, doesn't clean it. They just don't do the things that anybody who wants a bike to last would do. But in this case, and this example, and the 3 others that are in there, to be fair, the 3 used ones, they all look like this. They're all absolutely mint. So it can be done. You can buy a Chinese bike, run it for years, have some couple of thousand miles on, and it can still look like a pristine new bike. So the moral of today's story, as you will, is to look after your bike, whatever it is, however much you've paid for it, look after it and it will last. And this bike, and there's a few more like it inside, different colours, different specs, but they all look absolutely gleaming, and they're used, but they're less than £2,000. so that for me is, it's a good saving. It's a used bike bargain, 100%. It just looks and feels like a brand new bike, only it's a used price. So absolute bargain. I give it a double thumbs up for me for the used bike bargain. I cannot recommend these enough. Used, brilliant. In this condition, yes. New bikes are still unbelievably cheap. I think they're all, well, I say only, they're £500 more expensive than one of these. But as shown, in 4 years your bike can still look as good as this. So, you know, if you're going to look after it, if you're going to garage it, if you're going to clean it, if you're going to just look after it, it'll last. If you're interested in a used one, I would say Into Moto for me are the best people in the northwest to buy one of these bikes from. That's going to do me. I'm going to go in. I've got wet again, so I'm going to go in here, see if I can blag a coffee out of them, and yeah, I will catch you on the next one. Hopefully we'll get a dry day, but expect more rain. Catch you later. Ta-ra.